begin now. One of the panelists is about to come. We are already slightly late. Most of the speakers were here on time, but we thought we'd wait for a few minutes so that our panel is here. It's indeed a privilege for the Teachers Association and the other two organizations which are organizing this function that we have a distinguished panel of speakers. Why we thought of this was because, in a sense, the nation needs to know what the economic agenda of the various political parties is. Today, we don't really understand where the economy is going, what the party's position would be. So we thought it would be interesting to have a discussion amongst them and also have an open house. So we kept a long session, 3 hours. This will be divided into two. Basically, first the panelists will speak, and then the thing will be open to the house. Now, for the panelists also, what we have decided is that they'll make an opening remark in 10 minutes about what their party's agenda is, and then the panelists themselves will ask sharply pointed questions to the speaker, and within 3 minutes they will reply. So each speaker will get 15 minutes in that sense. And this way we go through with all the speakers, and then after that, when the time is done, then we will have the open house session in which people from the house, they can ask questions. So that is the format in which we have done it. And now, just to set the background for our discussion, I have a few slides that I want to project so that we know what is the situation with regard to the Indian economy. This is a slide which shows how the Okay, so the Indian economy, these are some of the issues that confront us. Persisting poverty and its changing dimensions. So we have extreme poverty which may be coming down, but poverty is persisting. Then we have the philosophy of growth at any cost, and there's growing inequity in the country. The rich have become exceedingly rich. We have a large number of billionaires, but a large number of poor people also. The philosophy of growth at any cost is also hurting our environment. We need to be concerned about that as well. Then there is persisting macroeconomic balances for the last 12 quarters, and we can take the data slide here. We have a declining rate of growth in the economy. Yeah. This slide shows that for the last 12 quarters, the rate of growth of the Indian economy has been declining. Various sectors, industrial sector, services sector, GDP, they've all gone down. Agriculture rate of growth has also gone down, except in the last year because of the bumper crop. So the economy has been sliding for the last 12 quarters. It's not as if it's only sliding now. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now this shows how there's a persisting inflation. The fiscal deficit is remaining very high, and the current account deficit had reached a peak. It is of course moderated now, but the danger is that it could again go back. So these three deficits are creating a problem as far as the economy is concerned. Next slide, please. Now this slide shows that actually the high growth period of the last 10 years shows a declining trend. Whereas the earlier period from 1981 to 1990-91 was a slightly rising trend. 1990-91 to 2002-03, that's again a rising trend, but the period from 2002-03 to the 2012-13 is a high growth period, but now the trend is declining. If we split up between the first 5 years and the next 5 years, then in the last 5 years the trend rate of growth is going down very fast. So this is some data that I thought I could project so that the panelists could reflect on what's happening to our rate of growth. Now we go back to the other thing. Okay, so next the problem is the external sector. There's indiscriminate opening up and the rupee has declined very sharply. It had peaked 12 quarters back. It had peaked at 44 rupees. It has come down in between to 68 and then gone back up to, no, we got the wrong slide. Next one. Now, this one. and the rupee has been down by roughly about 25% as compared to 12 quarters back. There's a crisis in agriculture with society very high and farmers want to leave agriculture. There is high underemployment and unemployment, especially among the youth. There is persisting inflation, and especially in food items. And WPI and CPI do not fully represent the inflation in the Indian economy. Next slide, please. The social infrastructure, there is inadequacy and rising cost of health and education. In the physical infrastructure, there is poor quality and shortages there. Corruptions and scams at the national and the state levels will be very high. And then the final question that I want to pose is our development model flawed? And can we copy from others? Because very often it is said that we should copy from China or we should copy from some other economy. So these are some of the questions that I'd like to pose to our panelists, and they can address it along with their own agenda as to how they'll be addressing some of these questions. Now I request the speaker from Congress Party, the Honorable Minister, Anand Sharma ji. Everybody knows him, he does not require any introduction. So I'll pose a few questions here which are specific to the Congress Party. There are many achievements to your credit in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years. But the problem is last 12 quarters, as the data suggests, things have been going down. So what does one plan to do about that? What could not be done in the last 5 years about the economy, whether we'll be able to do through the program you suggest in the coming 5 years? The credit rating agencies the government has been very sensitive to, WTO provisions the government is very sensitive to. Is that at the expense of the vast majority of the people? And why have there been so many scams? So these are some of the questions that we pose, which you can answer in your presentation.
Professor Arun Kumar, Head of the JNU Teachers Association, my own colleague, friend in Parliament, Kapil Sen, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, Prashant Bhushan, members of the faculty, and dear students. It's an important subject. It's but natural that as and when we have elections, whether state elections, local elections, and national elections, issues do come up. And in every election, it's not one issue but a multiple of issues where the citizens have a right to know. And it becomes therefore the duty of every political party, A, to tell them what their thinking is, their approach, what they have done, what have been the responses, and what they propose to do in the future if they retain or regain the trust and confidence, which in our democracy, like any other democracy, is very important. What I feel to begin with is to say one, that any narrative, any discussion must have a balance. And we must also have a comprehension of what is the situation in our own country, in our neighborhood, in the extended neighborhood, and rest of the world. It's important because we live in a world which is interconnected and interdependent. Gone are the days, decades ago, where you can create insular walls around, and the countries will look inwards towards protectionism. And even in the case of engaging with the world, engaging less by going for substitutions, which has been the guiding philosophy for historical reasons, given the inadequate of resources, infrastructure, access to technologies, or capacities to assimilate technologies. Last 10 years, as Professor Arun Kumar was referring to, we have to go back, in fact, to the turn of the century as to where we were. And the fundamental question would be that if there have been ups and downs, which we cannot really deny, and can't quarrel with facts and numbers, at the same time, this must be borne in mind that there have been significant strides, beginning with this century, and confined there, where we were in the year 2003-4. That was a high growth. The global economy was sailing merrily. There were global tailwinds. This fact is often forgotten by analysts. Strong tailwinds which continued up to 2007. Thereafter, the world economy is not the same. There has been a very severe financial crisis, collapse of institutions, banks, insurance companies, markets, not slowdown, but literal collapse of investment flows into many countries and destinations. And the world economy continues to face the strong headwinds now into the 7th year. This is the reality which must never ever be forgotten. There has been a contraction in the global economy, which is projected even this year to grow barely at 1.2%. There are many economies of rich countries which are in negative growth for 6 consecutive years. Only one major economy that has staged recovery and going above 3.2% is the United States of America. So during this crisis period, it's the emerging economies which have actually performed very well, and we became the driving engine, not only of growth, but the global recovery after the 2008-9 crisis. Both China, India rebounded to very high growth. We went up again from 6.9%, that was the fall, from 9.5%, we went again to 9%. But what I want to share with you is that during that period, just to keep the momentum going, India injected 3.5% of its GDP in 3 stimulus packages to revive the economy and to ensure that we sustain jobs and remain competitive in the global context. 10 years ago, India's GDP was $500 billion US. Now 7 years of this crisis period, 6 years to be precise, we are $2 trillion. The petroleum prices, since you refer to inflation and you refer to deficits, was $23 per barrel of Brent crude. Our total oil import bill, we are dependent on imports, was $23 billion US. Today, it crossed $185 billion US. The price of petrol per barrel reached 126. It has never gone below 103, 104. You all can follow on a daily basis. But yes, despite all this, the foreign exchange reserves of this country, which were 112 billion, have crossed 300 billion, whereas you pay 9 times more for only petroleum and gas imports. These are the painful, hard facts. Our trade has grown despite the global headwinds. Our exports were 56 billion US. We crossed 309. The final numbers have yet to come in of 2013-14. But over the figure of the previous year, when we were 300, because we fell the previous year from 309 to 300, we would have again gained by about 15 billion US. I can very happily share with you, we have brought down both the trade account deficit and the current account deficit. I've given you the reason for the trade account deficit. It's there for anyone to check. But if the trade account deficit is not brought down, there are only 3 ways you can get the foreign exchange. It's not a question of opening up of sectors. You can't be a global player by erecting walls around yourself. Today, Indian entities, entrepreneurs are engaging with the world in every continent. Indian presence is there in manufacturing, in investment, in institution building. If you're not part of the world, then we should be agreeing with those who are questioning and criticizing us on taking away jobs, on business process outsourcing, and also on the movement of skilled professionals by equating that with the immigrations. It has happened in America, it is happening in UK, and these are the issues which are of concern. But this is about our young professionals, and they are going and engaging. But if they are doing that, they are also helping and contributing to the growth of those very economies, countries and companies. At the same time, you seek inward investments. But just to cap the trade component, our two-way trade is in excess of 800 billion US dollars. You add services, 2 years ago, India crossed 1 trillion US dollars. Amongst the major economies of the world that we are today, we have remained despite the 2 years of sharp slowdown, which was rightly mentioned, because global contraction, investment flows, and a host of reasons, including domestic reasons, and a very shrill and negative narrative, which does impact morale. Sometimes decision-making processes do slow down. I have no hesitation to say that. But the investment flows in India have not ebbed. We have retained our place as the first 3 favored destinations for foreign investments. And to be exact, the first 2 now, and the latest few months back, the Ernst & Young puts India at number 1 because of the opening up of many other sectors. So our foreign direct investment inflows year-on-year basis and in the last 1 decade have multiplied 15 times. The exact foreign development direct investment that has come in, roughly up to February 2014, would be 327 billion US dollars, out of which 307 would have come in UPA 1 and UPA 2, and in fact 205 in the UPA 2. During this period of the global economic crisis, this is the reality. So when you have this much of investment coming in, this much of trade growing, this means you do have an economy which is not struggling despite a bad period, but still which is investing, generating wealth and redistributing wealth. The other issue is about the poverty, the employment-related issues. I'll share with you our vision and the agenda. But on agriculture, just at one point, MSP has multiplied 3 times in 10 years. The minimum support price to the farmers. There has been a loan waiver of 71,000 crores. Investments have grown in agriculture. And our agri-exports have crossed 45 billion US dollars, growing up from 7 billion to 45 billion. There's huge investments in institution building, including IITs, IIMs, Indian Institutes of Science, Indian Institutes of Design, going up from 1 to 5 in both in science and in design. There's also enormous investment when it comes to the social security net, whether we talk of the Rural Employment Guarantee Program, the enormous amount of resources are going in, education, health, and food security. Now, we are a government in office for 10 years. We are bound to face criticism. We are bound to face anti-incumbency. At the same time, I must also mention, with all respect, by all accounts of the narrative, so far our report card has been written by our detractors on the right and the left. Now, we should get a fair chance to give our report card as to where we are. Surely I'll have time during questions to tell you about one issue which I have not been able to comment because of the paucity 10 minutes are not adequate for 10 years, but about the so-called alleged perceived scams. What has been the government's response to this? Since you are students, just to tell you that the budgetary allocation for health have gone up 8 times, from 10,000 crores to 80,000 crores during this period. For health, from 7,000 to 36,000 crores. So you have to have a larger canvas to look at the picture that if resources and wealth is being generated, India today has money to invest in institutions, to give a better social security cover to its citizens, and we are very happy and proud. No doubt that we are home still to a large number of poor people, but by all accounts, not my account, not the government records, you go by any global institution, and the latest was a recent statement by Bill Gates Foundation. 150 million Indians have been brought out of the poverty net That's not a small number. And not only that, the national debt has sharply declined. These are the benefits which we have. We have a high saving rate, we have a high investment rate compared to most of the countries. We are second only to China when it comes to investment or savings rate, but it keeps on going up and down by percentage points. I can reassure you that what we have for the future in our mind is through the active continuing implementation of one of the landmark and historic policy rollouts of the National Manufacturing Policy, which proposes to raise the share of manufacturing in our GDP from 16% to 25% in one decade, creating 100 million skilled jobs. And the principal instrumentality are the national investment and manufacturing zones, which are not clusters but standalone integrated greenfield industrial cities, which will transform India and power India to become a manufacturing-led exports powerhouse in the world. 16 of these stand notified, 8 master plans have been completed, 8 of these are coming along the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, which as per the World Bank is the most innovative infrastructure project ever to be conceived and the second largest ever to be implemented in the world. 3 more industrial corridors and 8 other mega cities of the future, and add to that 2 cities which are developing dedicated entirely to electronics. There is work to be done. That is the agenda for the future, and we are committed to continue in this endeavor. We hope that the ecosystem of the climate will remain conducive, and this country, I have enormous faith, I'm an eternal optimist. I believe in our people will continue to move forward. Thank you.
Now the fellow panelists can ask one question, each sharply pointed question to him. No, for the moment, then he'll reply in 3 minutes, then we open up later on. So if there's any question that you want to ask. Okay, you want to change the format, let the presentation, okay, we can do that. Okay. So now we go on to the app, and with regard to the next slide. Prashant Bhushan, as you know, is from our party, and he will be, the following questions, Prashant, addressed to you. One is, will an anti-corruption plan solve all the problems of the people? Do you think that corruption is rampant among businesses, or is it only an aberration? What are the other major policies that are needed for the deprived sections of people in addition to the anti-corruption plan? And why is there no national manifesto as yet? So these are the questions that we are posing in addition to whatever you want to say about your plan. Prashant.
Thank you, Arunji, fellow panelists and friends. Before I answer these questions, let me briefly say what I see as the major problem of our economy today. Unfortunately, all the governments that have come in the recent past, whether it is the UPA or the NDA, have just concentrated on GDP growth, as if GDP growth is a panacea that will solve all problems. We have seen that and some of it is mindless GDP growth. We have seen that during the same period when our GDP growth was the highest during the last decade or 15 years or so, during that very period, India has gone down in the global world on the Human Development Index. Our percentage of malnourished children has grown to 49%, the highest in the world. 300,000 farmers have committed suicide, something which has never happened in history in the past. Therefore, I think the primary thing that we need to see when we talk of economic policies is whether this economic policy will benefit the vast majority of the common people, whether it will generate employment for the majority of the common people, and whether and what it will do to the environment. What will this kind of policy do to the ecology and environment as a whole? These are three things which must be kept in mind while formulating any economic policy, and it cannot be centered on just mindless GDP growth or increasing foreign direct investment, which is what unfortunately most governments in the recent past have concentrated on. In this whole drive to attract foreign investment, we have allowed this kind of totally dishonest double taxation treaty with Mauritius to continue, which allows 50% of the foreign direct investment in India, more than 50% is coming through Mauritius. These are not companies of Mauritius, but companies which are coming in through the Mauritius route by setting up post-box companies in Mauritius. And why is this happening? Because Mauritius has become a tax haven which allows complete non-transparency. So all kinds of crime money, hot money, black money can be laundered through Mauritius, brought back to India and invested in, again, non-transparent financial instruments through instruments like participatory notes into all kinds of speculative activity. We have allowed every kind of speculative activity, whether it is in the stock exchange, whether it is in the commodities exchange, just speculation is running, or in the currency exchange. The whole thing has become totally speculative, which has led to huge problems of all kinds. And thirdly, we have allowed completely non-transparent, arbitrary systems of decision-making on economic policies or economic decision-making to flourish in this country, which has allowed corruption to increase, which has led to all these scams which have taken place. So our primary principles of formulating economic policies would be to see the impact of these policies on people, on the vast majority of the people, to see their impact on their employment generation potential for a vast majority of the people, and to see their impact on the environment as a whole. On these three broad impacts, we would have to formulate our economic policy rather than just GDP growth. Secondly, today in taking decisions or formulating policies, there is no involvement of the people at all. Why just economic policies? All kinds of decisions, even on decisions involving, economic decisions involving how the finances or the budgets devoted to even villages or to even mohallas would be used, the people have no say. A policy is formulated at the top. They are told that 25% of the budget has to be spent on Indira Vikas, Awas Yojana, whatever, or this is on this Yojana. So the people there may have completely different priorities. Different areas have different priorities. Therefore, decision making, even on economic policies, should be decentralized as much as possible. There should be as much participation of the people as possible in even economic decision making, economic policy making, which can be brought in. So that would be the second principle. And the third is there should be complete transparency in decision making so as to reduce corruption. Complete transparency, and that is why this anti-corruption plank is important, because today one of the major problems that we are seeing in our economy and which has led to all these scams is because of not having transparent enough systems of decision making, not having any proactive transparency. Even this RTI Act has been defeated, virtually defeated, by non-appointment of information commissioners, by appointment of useless information commissioners, by the pendency of information commission. There is no proactive disclosure. All, in our view, all government files should be put out on a public website immediately so that people can see what is happening. There is no reason, unless there is some specific reason for withholding, that some decision is still being made and premature disclosure may lead to some problems. Therefore, you can hold it up for that stage only. But immediately after the decision is taken, the file must be put out on a public website so that people can see how that decision has been taken, on what considerations, and who said what in this decision making, etc. So, these are the principles. Now, on specific things, see, there is a general perception that we are against private enterprise, etc., that the Aam Aadmi Party is against private enterprise. We are not against private enterprise. We feel that private enterprise needs to be encouraged, but private monopolies should not be allowed. Today, in the guise of encouraging privatization, etc., we have created private monopolies. We have allowed our natural resources which belong to the people, our oil, gas, minerals, land, everything to be privatized for commercial considerations and without involving even those people who are going to be directly affected by such decisions. So therefore, that's our principle, that Inspector Raj needs to be reduced. Unfortunately, in this liberalization, without reducing Inspector Raj and thereby still allowing scope for all kinds of corruption by virtue of this Inspector Raj, all kinds of very, very tedious rules, complicated rules, which allow these inspectors to go and extract money from these businesses, etc., that have been allowed. But in the guise of this liberalization, public resources have been rapidly privatized and given to the hands of private corporations so as to even create private monopolies in this country. So therefore that must not be allowed. But Inspector Raj certainly needs to be reduced. Similarly, we must increase the transparency in the functioning of the government. We need to promote small-scale industries and not just this, that we will only promote these large industries run by Tata, Ambani, Adani, etc. This whole concept must be stopped. Actually, unfortunately, this whole race towards GDP growth has led to this situation where you are only promoting very, very large industries which hardly employ any people and completely neglecting small scale industries, etc. We need to promote agriculture in this country. Agriculture has been neglected. We need to increase the support prices of agricultural produce to bring it in line according to the Swaminathan Commission's recommendations, to bring it in line with the actual cost of production. The agriculturists must be given at least the actual cost of production plus some profit, whatever is the actual or the normal cost of production, etc. We need to increase microshed water development, which means rainwater harvesting, etc., which will rapidly increase agriculture. You can actually make entire country irrigated. All agricultural land can be irrigated within 2 years if you promote micro watershed development, etc. Agricultural producing marketing areas, etc., where farmer is compelled to sell only in these mandis. These mandis become private monopolies. They are cartelized and farmers are required to sell only in these mandis. This needs to be reviewed, very, very fundamentally reviewed. This is one of the reasons why agricultural produce is so expensive for people. Seed monopolies need to be stopped. Organic farming needs to be promoted. In the financial sector, just 2 minutes. We need to stop all this speculative activity by allowing speculative activity in the stock market, in the currency market, in the commodities market, etc. All this needs to be stopped. Non-transparent financial institutions need to be stopped. this routine tax and amnesties need to be done away with. The Mauritius Treaty, etc., needs to be reviewed, and we need to have this general anti-avoidance rules, etc., which is basically to plug avoidance of tax, etc., and these general tax holidays given to various industries. This needs to be stopped, and a stable, progressive tax regime needs to be brought, where the share of direct taxes in the total tax regime needs to be increased. Contract labor needs to be protected, unorganized sector labor needs to be protected, that is domestic workers, etc. For them, there should be laws to protect them and to ensure contract labor should not be allowed. In fact, companies and industry must be told to employ them as regular workers on regular conditions. On energy, we need to shift to renewable sources of energy such as solar, wind, tidal, etc., away from this thermal which is causing the global warming, and away from nuclear which is most expensive as well as most dangerous. So broadly, this is the sort of a broad idea of the kind of economic policies that the Aam Aadmi Party would like to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prashant. Mr. G.P. Tripathi is not yet arrived. He's stuck in a traffic jam. So we'll proceed to the next. For the moment, we'll go to BJP, and Nirmala Sitharaman is here. She's an alumni of JNU. We've seen her on the show. So the key question that we have posed is, how will your policies be different from those of UPA except for minor differences? The economic agenda of NDA was not very different from that of earlier regimes when UPA was here. What hope is there now that we will have a different regime of policies? And how will you tackle corruption that has been rampant in the states ruled by a party? This, along with the other, policy that perhaps today the program has been around, so you can enlighten us on these questions and the other questions in your meeting. Thank you.
Distinguished panel, JNU Teachers Association, students, it's always lovely coming home, and this opportunity certainly is something which I didn't expect to have, but I'm grateful that the Teachers Association thought of including me. Oh, well, my senior DPP is here. Would you want to give him the order of preference? Or should I continue? All right. The questions for me, I would put it as one. Seems to be spread over four, but you are essentially saying we are no different from the Congress. You are also talking only of corruption. There are a whole lot of difference between the BJP and the Congress. Although 10 minutes I may not be able to expand on, the few points on which I think the last 10 years have been a wasted decade will expand on points on which I think why we are very different from the Congress. Certainly this kind of a big ticket corruption, series of corruption, unnoticed corruption, look the other way when the corruption happens, don't take any corrective, is not a feature of BJP. So with that said, I think I'll go on with the points which I wanted to tell you about. First thing, growth, in spite of all the government of India wants us to believe, has fluctuated. It's not as if the slide shown earlier by Professor Arun Kumar clearly says that the trend now is of a trend which is coming down. And the first 5 years of UPA, certainly the benefit of the previous regime has been utilized. And let me remind you, in 2008, before going to the elections of 2009, the Prime Minister of the country had very clearly said, look, the external pressures of the financial meltdown which is happening outside has absolutely no bearing on India because the Indian fundamentals are very strong. And indeed, the Indian fundamentals are strong. Why did we go through this phase of UPA 2 when absolutely inflation remained uncontrolled? when in spite of all the growth, you never had a relief in terms of people's purchasing power, and above all, the way in which growth was touted, it was completely without job creation. So, on the very argument of look at the growth figures, I would only say let us temper that growth with the fact that inflation was remaining unbridled, and when your purchasing power is so deprived of its strength because of inflation, no point in talking about a growth which is going up, but it means nothing to me. It means nothing to me also because the jobs are not there. And this is not a BJP data, Government of India's own data, which is released through the National Sample Survey Organization, proved that in the 5 years of NDA, nearly 6 crore jobs, 5.5 million plus jobs were created. Whereas what was happening during the first 5 years, which were the best years of UPA, only 2 million jobs or little over that was created. So without jobs, with the influence of inflation, the growth that you're talking about actually has no meaning for me. So that is my first argument against the growth, inflation and the joblessness kind of an argument. Second, if you look at the way in which agriculture has suffered in this country, which employs a large number of unskilled laborers, and also majority of the population, even at subsistence level, depend on agriculture. Now, if agriculture, for which this government, UPA, really commissioned the Swaminathan committee to say, look at the ways in which we can improve agriculture. My question is, if you intended to really do something about agriculture, why is it that the committee's report have been kept in cold storage? There are several doables in it. Why don't you pick it up? Reform agriculture, bring relief to the farmers. On the contrary, what is happening is whether it is Maharashtra or Andhra Pradesh, I'm picking them because they are Congress-run states. For the last 10 years, like in the center, Congress is in power both in Maharashtra and in Andhra Pradesh where I live. About a year ago, farmers voluntarily came and said, we really can't cope with what is happening around. We are going to go having a year-long crop holiday. In India, where farming depends not just on the landowner, but largely also for those who are employed in it, if the farmers choose voluntarily to go for a crop holiday because the input costs were going up, they just couldn't cope with the pressures of agriculture, the marketing abilities were getting reduced, and the power playing truant, they couldn't even produce what they otherwise would produce. And these are Congress-ruled states. I'm talking about Andhra Pradesh where people went on a crop holiday, and I'm also going to be talking about Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra where of all the farmers' suicide, if you take the complete total, 46% of all the suicides happen in these two states. If indeed Congress intended to be all that inclusive and take care of figures in agriculture, both of output and of also the farmers, certainly they should have paid their attention. And if I've heard the person who's very anxious to know about farmer suicide in Gujarat, I'd certainly come to it. I'm not undermining any one death. It is important that no one dependent on agriculture or any sector should ever be pushed to this unfortunate situation of having to commit suicide. But the fact remains that if you're talking about suicides, and if Congress is all that avowed for reforming agriculture, there should have even been one death in Maharashtra, one death in Andhra Pradesh. So, let's not be in a hurry to conclude. And also, if you're looking at agricultural produce exports, the flip-flop this government showed about cotton exports, about groundnut exports, every time when the farmer was ready with his crop, and most often, you know that the farmers tie up with merchants abroad to sell their products well in advance, even as they're sowing their seeds. But when the crop is ready, the government would come up. And this didn't happen 1 year, it happened more than 2 years. Just as they are ready with their farm produce to export, the government would say, stop all exports. Thereby denying the farmer a chance to better his life by exporting, and also denying the Indian market the foreign exchange that he would have earned otherwise. So I'm just I'm flagging off few issues for want of time, and that's about agriculture. You forgot the committee's report, which you yourself convened. Swaminathan's committee remained wherever it was. Then look at inflation. There was a sense of the House resolution passed in the Parliament. 3 times it was discussed. Every political party stood up and said, please do something. And after the sense of the House resolution, there was also, under Shri Pranab Mukherjee, if I remember correct, 3 or 4 committees formed on seeing where doables to immediately give relief to those stressed under price rise can be brought in. A committee which was looking at PDS, a committee which looked at futures market, a third committee which was looking at crops and crops production and therefore better cereals and other things, and also distribution for people who are really below poverty line. None of them have even been touched after they've been submitted by the various groups, chief ministers, planning commission members, all of them were in these groups. And the reports were all there. Reports were all there, no action taken. Finally, on poverty, this government did not even do a socio-economic survey after it was last done in 2004. Post that, till today, we've been told 38 rupees, 28 rupees, you all know that. Based on expenditure, based on consumption, based on income, till today we have not arrived at what is poverty level. But we are talking about distribution for poverty, alleviating poverty and so on. And it is here that I would want to underline the fact that the Reserve Bank of India has been left to deal with controlling inflation through its monetary policy. Both Mr. Subbarao and now Raghuram Rajan are very clear on how they want to go ahead with their monetary policy management, but nobody is talking about the fiscal policy. The government is made to defend itself on it. Since my time is over, I won't go further, but I think these are the very flaws which an India would never do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirmala. And now I will go back to NCP. The TP Tripathi has come, so we can now request Mr. Tripathi. The questions that I posed, whatever else you want to say, just a few questions you can look at. As an ally in UPA 2, you face the same questions that the Congress does. Some major ministries were with your party, like agriculture and civil aviation. These have not done well given the crisis in agriculture and civil aviation. How will your policies change to deal with the problems confronting the people? So these are some of the questions in addition to that, whatever your party's program. Thank you.
Distinguished leaders of the dais, friends, I first apologize. I've never been late today, but the peculiar thing, I never thought that I would be caught up with Delhi University traveling here in the traffic of that time. Anyway, I apologize because I did not have the opportunity to listen to all these speakers. Now that Nirmala has spoken and 2 questions have been posed by Professor Arun Kumar, my perspective is, and our party's perspective also is, that economy, the moment you talk about economy and what are the things that you want to do, I have brought the manifesto, and Nirmala has already given a lot of statistics. And one of the great authors, Arthur Koestler, has said in his novel, Darkness at Noon, that statistics never bleeds. Therefore, the academicians, politicians and the journalists have a habit to throw statistics on the people because it doesn't bleed. So I'm not going into much of the statistics, but economics, basically, any perspective on economics depends on your social perspective. Don't forget that economics as a discipline first was known as political economy. And even in the famous book Wealth of the Nations, written by Adam Smith, he talks about the length of the stockings of Queen Elizabeth I. How long are the stockings? And there's so many things which are there in that book. And after reading that book, I understood that the synthesis between sense and nonsense makes the common sense of economics. Now, let me begin begin with the questions asked by Professor Arun Kumar and mentioned by Nirmala about agriculture. Well, as I said, not too much of statistics, but one is statistics. During the entire NDA rule, the budgetary allocation for agriculture was only 2%. Under UPA 1 and 2, it is 4.6%. If agriculture is so bad, there are problems in agriculture, I am not denying that. But the record production of food grains in India in the last 4 years, exporting rice, wheat and sugar and cotton, not importing, that shows the strength of the Indian farmers. Therefore, our party's perspective of agriculture is clear. Whether you like it or not, you have to increase the minimum support prices. You have to give the farmers their due. It is not that whatever they produce has to be taken here and there and they should not be paid properly. If farmers are given dignity and self-respect and self-reliance to this country, you have to give them their due. So, second point, all the necessary elements that go into the agriculture have to be provided properly and on time. Then, there is another aspect about agriculture which will be debatable in the House and everybody will agree or disagree is, you have to have modernization of agriculture. Crop patterns. Look at the model, they talk about Gujarat model these days. Gujarat model. What is Gujarat model? Is there anything new in Gujarat model? I can point out different levels in Gujarat model, but look at another model, the Maharashtra model. Where, imagine, could you ever think of growing grapes in Baramati and those areas where there was no water? New methods of water conservation. What is the level of development in a place like Varanasi? Try and find out. The milk products from there are exported to America. When you talk about agriculture and agrarian products in the country, in the last few years, especially in the last 10 years or so, you see how much export of your milk products is there? What is happening about the export of rice, wheat, sugar, cotton, all that? I am not trying to be repetitive, but since this is mentioned, therefore I am stating certain facts. Any analysis without facts is not even a good fiction. So you have to go to the facts. Secondly, about civil aviation. Professor Arun Kumar asked that question. So I must enter that arena about which I know very little about. But about civil aviation, in any case, throughout the world, the aviation industry was a big problem. But in India, airports were modernized. What was the situation of Delhi and Bombay airport? Airports in other cities also. Now at least you have world-class airports. Many airlines, even private airlines, many are collapsing. Many are defeated, though the name is Vijay Mallya. Many airlines are not Vijay but defeat. Nonetheless, yet new airlines are in that field. So opening up of the skies. Once I used to say very jocularly कि साहब आप कहते हैं कि हम कुछ नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, अरे यूपीए सरकार में धरती और आकाश दोनों एनसीपी के पास है। एग्रीकल्चर मिनिस्टर शरद कुमार और सिविल एविएशन प्रभु पटेल new planes were bought. Your entire fleet had to be modernized. Everything was old. When the plane will fall, when it will crash, nobody knew. Once late Jyoti Babu told me in Calcutta that what your minister is doing, he made a critical remark very jocularly. Your civil aviation minister Praful Patel is buying planes and selling airports. So I asked him why Buddhadev Bhattacharya asked Praful Patel to modernize Calcutta airport. He said, no, he's doing a good job, that's okay. So if you don't modernize, if you don't make your facilities, infrastructure facilities world class, there are serious problems. Now, Professor Arun Kumar, the moment I exceed my time, please stop me. Now I come to the basic problems I have said. There are social aspects of economy, especially in developing countries. And that is what our party wants in these 2014 elections and later also to be done. That social aspect of economy is very important. Try and study the models in two states which were led by the left, Bengal and Kerala. Bengal, a model of development couldn't take place, which was inspiring. Kerala, a model of development took place where in many fields, again I'm not going into a statistic, where Kerala is far ahead of China in many areas of development. Why? It is not merely because it is money order economy or remittance economy. No. Primarily because of women's education, women's literacy, women's education in Kerala, that the entrepreneurship, new sense of enterprise developed. So any government comes, whether it is LDF or UDF, the model of development cannot be changed in Kerala. Look at the developments in Kerala. Professor Prabhat Patnaik of the same university has written and talked about Kerala's development model, which according to me is the best model of development in the last 2 decades. See, they have set the pattern. Whichever party comes to power, you can't change that model of development. So that is what I am repeating. Education, healthcare, proper social peace, law and order. These are essential elements for economic development. This is what we emphasize. In our election manifesto also for 2014, we have emphasized this. Hamara Elan, Rashtriya Swabhiman. NCP's guide, nation's pride. This is our party. Without this, you can't develop economy. I don't think there are economic development without that. And finally, to my friends on the left, look at China. What is the model of development that they are doing? In the last time that I visited China, I asked that chief of their international department of the Communist Party of China, what are you doing? What is your target? Without winking an eyelid, he looked at us and said, building capitalism. Simple answer. Recently, last year I went to Vietnam. Vietnam in many cases is a great inspiration to all of us. So, now in Vietnam, you see the entire development of private sector in different areas. So in India also, there is a lot of things which are, the names are such that they are completely devoid of reality. Like when you talk of public school India, public school, has nothing to do with public. It is basically science school. Same way the public sector has nothing to do with public. It eats into the vitals of public economy and public money. Therefore, whether you like it or not, you have to dismantle the public sector, especially the corporate. Otherwise, they will keep eating the people's money and everything. And lastly, what we say, people's enterprise, which we emphasize. And Professor Anand Kumar and friends, this is my last argument. This is our party's perspective again on economy. If you do not develop, why Gujarat is developed? Forget about this Modi model. Gujarat was developed much before by the visionary Chief Minister Madhav Singh Solanki, who in India for the first time introduced the single window system. It is not Modi. Forget about Modi. Gujaratis are entrepreneurial by their own temperament. Maharashtra. Again, why? Because you emphasize on people's initiative, not on government's freebies. That you give laptop, you give this, you give that, you give them milk, you give them money, everything free. Where you have given everything free, there is no development. The development is on the people's own endeavor. जो संस्कृत में बोलते हैं ना, उद्योगिनम पुरुषसिंगम वैदि लक्ष्मी. The man who has enterprise, only to him Lakshmi comes. So it is the individual's enterprise which has to be given. And therefore, friends, I'll end my presentation here with one shloka of Sanskrit. Half of it, all of you must be knowing, because in childhood, that is taught, only one sentence of that shloka. The second is not taught. The basis of economy is this shloka is Vidya dadati vinayam, vinayatayati patratam. Knowledge, learning gives you humility. Humility gives you competence. This is sentence number 1 in that shloka, which is told to all of us, and the second is not told. You know what is the second one? Vidya dadati vinayam vinayatayati patratam patratva dhanamapnoti dhanat sukhvardhe. Competence gives you wealth, and wealth gives you pleasure. That is the basis of economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, our panelist, Mr. Tapan Sen from CPIM, and we have a few questions for you. In spite of poverty in your economic agenda, you have shrunk in parliament and the states. The question is why? Why have you not successfully put forward an alternative to the current policies? And is there a credibility gap with the public regarding the economic agenda? Karaj said that left wanted to do what AAP has done. So is there a credibility gap? Mr. Sen, please come.
Professor Varun Kumar, my friends in the dais, co-panelists, and also dear students and members of faculties. Let me attempt the first question itself. Yes, we shrunk because there are shortcomings in our pursuing own goal much more effectively throughout the country. We understood, we follow, we pursued a pattern of policy with an understanding the manner with which it has to be pursued, the militancy with which that has to be taken down to on the street. Definitely there were shortcomings. Because of that is shrunk. But that does not matter. We have confidence in our faith and ideology, and definitely will overcome. Second point, I think, on the basic subject, that on the issue of the economic agenda in view of the forthcoming election, I think here we have basic directional difference with most of my panelists friends here. We don't think that even Congress and BJP, who are contesting with each other for capturing of power at the center, so far as the economic policy paradigm is concerned, they are following the same project. We believe that project is basically based on the long discredited understanding of trickle-down theory. Let rich continue to make riches, let them be incentivized, let them be allowed more and more. We can't call it a freebie, but those are also a kind of freebies. And they will earn, and that will trickle down to people, and people will benefit out of that. That theory has long discredited. Even those many non-left economists and intellectuals has accepted that this is no more valid. Rather, it generates a machination of sucking up, and that is precisely that has been happening in our country, particularly in the span of last 3 decades. We have seen growth exactly in the manner Professor Arun Kumar initially presented here, and then that growth has come down. But during the entire period of growth along with intermittent downs and ups, what is the situation with the people? Has there a lot improved? Some group of population might have benefited, but on the whole average, Indian population's general standard of living, has that really been improved? Particularly those who create wealth in the villages and the factories, in the workshops, in the shop floors, in the mines. I think even if you go by official statistics and annual survey of industries, if they are practically scanned, I think we have to come to a conclusion that overall real wage rate has stagnated and gone down despite the fact that we are continuously on an 4% to 5% average above growth path, and particularly during the 11th plan period, it could rise to a respectable 8.5% annually. I think even official statistics, of course, the statistic, the manner Tripathi ridiculed, I don't say go by that statistic, I am telling official statistics, it has actually gone down, very secularly gone down. And that explains that pre-1991, even if you go for that manufacturing sector, the wages share in the net value added, which was around 30%, now it is almost 10%. And profit share, which was 20% in the pre-1880s, now it is about 60%. Trickle down didn't work. Sucking up happened. And it has happened in the process of massive casualization, contractualization, privatization, deregulation, privatization of various public utilities, important municipal services, everything which carries welfare to people. This is one aspect. So, the left political agenda to reverse this trend So that definitely we need growth, but it must be growth with a proactive distributive equity, which ensures a rule of law for the people's earning, the people's wages, the people's return on their labor, both at the cities and in the towns and in the villages. In overall this framework, I think the whole policy on agriculture, the policy on industry, the policy of enterprises in other sectors need to be reformulated. And we have to break away from this trickle-down exercise. I think it needs, that is a very current need. Otherwise, this rate cannot be growth, even this growth cannot be sustained. As that present situation started signaling that non-sustainability after a respectable growth rate of 8.5% annually during 2005 to 10, we have not started going down. Maybe there will be some up next year on the base of a low base growth this year, but that ups and downs continues, that gloom is really prevailing, and if we really need to break through, this distributive aspect has to be taken care of, and that needs the whole reversal of the approach of the economic policy paradigm, on which, unfortunately, the major political outfits of our country, all contending for power, are together working for that project. So definitely the task of reversal is a very big task, very militant, undaunted task. We hope to carry it forward. Second point is, the one thing is being very often being talked about, whether I've been able to put the alternative. Is anything new in it? Since 1991, the left has been vociferously placing their alternatives to every step government is taken. Definitely I am not going to buy Mr. Tripaঠি's logic that public sectors are eating away the vitals of the economy. Rather, I like to plead it is this public sector which is keeping our national economy still afloat. They are not only eating away, they are not eating away vitals of our economy, but they are feeding the economy, including the private sector. Many of these private enterprises are working and minting their money on the infrastructure, on the basis, the foundation laid by these public sector industries, economies in all vital sectors of our economy. And when, right from 2007-8 onwards, when a real boom started after the global meltdown, and which has directly affected our economy as well. We are not insulated from the global economy. Our economy as well. But in the future, despite all freebies in the name of incentives, there are a lot of freebies. Annually 5,74,000 crore revenue foregone. These are freebies. And over and above that concession, if only on income tax and corporate tax account, the uncollected tax, after all concessions, whatever has been computed, that uncollected tax amounts to 5.1 lakh crore annually, which is increasing in a geometric progression if you scan the last 5 years figure. So despite all those freebies, their contribution to domestic investment has been secularly going down since 2008, and at by the end of 2011, it has reached 29.8%. Despite all freebies, all incentives. This is what is the reality. But during the same period, unconcerned what the market is, the public sector, let me cite, Steel Authority of India Limited has pumped 50,000 crore in national economy for its modernization and expansion project. The BHEL has invested for expanding its capacity from 5,000 megawatt to 20,000 megawatt. And NTPC has invested. It has kept the national economy afloat. So sorry, they are not eating away White House, and that's why we are so forthright. Don't allow them to be looted by the private sector. Don't privatize. That is all. And on this, why shall I stay? The working on a single project during NDA period. After all, during UPA 1, they are not talking of privatization. They are not talking of strategic sale. Please, strategic sale. They are only talking of disinvestment. But during NDA time, more than 10 public sector companies were just sold out. And some of them on a single bidder basis, practically. CAG has recorded its concern and observation on that. It was there, these are record. The first ever IPCL has gone to Mukesh Ambani, Reliance. And that was his launching pad for entering into the petroleum field, which is now controlling the mega refining capacity of the country and blackmailing the government of India on the matter of natural gas price. I have been raising that issue since 2006 December. Wrote at least 100 letters to Prime Minister, Petroleum Minister, all. I received, no doubt, acknowledgement to my letter, but not the reply on the issue as such. This is what is another important issue, which is called corruption. I don't like to go into detail, but we see, I understand, we understand, the left understands. This corruption is an integral part of the expropriation of national exchequer, or a kind of pilferage to national exchequer. This corruption is an integral part of that. You cannot look it as a failure. You cannot look into it in aberration. This is integrally linked with. Unless the direction of the policy is gone, it will not come. Last point. That again, it will come back to the distribution. What does it growth means? Here, this direction need to be changed. There must be an employment-intensive growth and focus on the domestic market. Otherwise, it cannot generate employment. It must be focused on the domestic market. Now, during the last budget speech, while speaking on the budget, our Honorable Finance Minister, definitely by pointing on that, he mentioned that yes, we are in a globe, but we are giving a push. There is no other goal but to promote manufacturing. Mr. Sharma also referred to that. And that must be for export. Here lies the problem. Here lies the problem. Unless you are focused on domestic market, and for that, there must be proactive, focused initiative for improving the purchasing power of the domestic consumers. Just by export orientation, you cannot make a break. You can make often ups and downs, but you cannot grow for a sustainable path, at the same time ensuring a proper distributive equity so that common people also can at least partially share the gains of growth. Otherwise, the story of growth remains that the entire value created is totally appropriated by the owners of capital, both domestic and foreign, and that creates a problem for domestic market, making domestic growth route unsustainable, putting it into crisis. So I believe that what is important, what is needed, and that needs to be debated in the coming electoral process also, that this path need to be reversed. A proper growth model with a distributive equity, with a focus towards the domestic market, towards improving purchasing power of the people, towards improving the employment potential of our own society, not creating the employment abroad. Our Mr. Sharma talked about flow of foreign capital in our country. During this period, I think you should be equally concerned. The FDI outflow was there to the tune of $29 billion within a span of last 1 year. That is also there. So, I think we must be focused towards domestic economy. Otherwise, this distortion and perversion will continue, speeding up the process of transfers from millions and billions to handful by creating further crisis in the economy. And economy is it will not be limited to the economy alone. I fully endorse Mr. Tripathi's anxiety, the social dimension of development. It will spread that distortion, perversion and crisis to the overall society, creating a serious volatility that is not in the interest of our great nation. So this is the alternative approach, and this should be our path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Now, the floor is open for questions to be asked. There are two people with mics. Can you please come here? Can you please address who you are addressing the question?
Yeah, my question is to Dr. Nirmala Sitharaman. You have acknowledged that during the first 5 years of UPA, the growth rate was very high. In fact, let me clarify that the growth rate, if you consider the whole 10 years, the growth rate was 7.5 compared to average growth rate of 5.7 during your 6 years growth. So, but you have justified that by saying that it's due to the spillover effect of the good policies of earlier government, that is the NDA government. Now, my question to you is that suppose if after this election, if you come to power, and if the growth rate increases, will you give credit to the UPA government's good policies for the increasing growth rate?
We'll take 1 hour of questions and then next question.
I'd like to put this question across parties. The fact that more than 100,000 crores of rupees are always given in the form of tax subsidy and also waiving of interest on the corporate loans. How do you plan to really recover this so that the social projects can be financed? That is one. The second question, my very specific question goes to Tripathi sir. Sir, you have very proudly mentioned Maharashtra model. I also come from that state. And I am not at all proud of my Maharashtra model. Because what you have described, that kind of a development of the model has benefited only to a particular caste and particular community. To which people and the electricity which my own district produces is in the perennial state of non-electricity, whereas the Western Maharashtra gets electricity. So we don't want that kind of a development. I think that's possible. The third question I would like to pose are, that is, you are talking about the decision making decentralized. My question is, if you are talking about the economic decentralization, then in the villages, the entire village system or otherwise Indian system is caste ridden. How we are going to address it? Because what we have seen, the so-called model of Swaraj, where there is no iota of development that goes to the SC/ST community. Okay.
Last question. I have a straightforward question to Prashant Bhushan sir. You were, I just wanted to know straightly, do you love capitalism? Do you love capitalism? And if so, you were speaking about the giants and monopolies. There are few monopolies. You can name one. Like Kejriwal, are you bold enough to point out some of the monopolies?
Okay. Next question. Is there?
My question is to NCP, Tripathi sir. Since you touched upon the question of civil aviation, and I would like to draw your attention towards the fixation of the airfare. So recently we made a movement or kind of protest regarding the airfare from here to Delhi to Ladakh. And it's in fact it's a question to the nation that the airfare from Delhi to Ladakh is 25. It goes up to 25,000, and sometimes it goes up to 35,000. From here to China, Beijing is 18,000. From here to Sri Lanka, it's around 6,000. From here to Mumbai, it's around 5,000. And from here to Paris, it's around 19,000. So I just wanted to know, and on the one hand, and China is introducing to Ladakh in Indian territory. And recently, you must have known that even last week that Indian Army human chain has been introduced by Chinese. And on the other hand, government of India is pushing us away. So this is in fact a question to the nation.
Okay.
So I just would like to draw your attention to this. Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is to Mr. Prashant. It seems that you are the more like fundamentalist on the economic policy. How do you create the job for the half of our population, is the youth in the age of 20 to 35, by making the small scale industries? How to create the job by pushing back to the public sector, not the private sector, as you pointed to your speech. I think the model you are presenting is the old model of the leftist and the socialist, which 1952 to 1990s. We in the 21st century, we don't need that kind of policy of the economy and the job creation. Thank you.
मेरा सवाल प्रशांत भूषण जी से है। जब हिंदुस्तान में 80% से ज़्यादा की आबादी जब 20 रुपये से कम के जीने पे मजबूर है, उस वक्त अगर आम आदमी पार्टी ये कह रही है कि प्राइवेटाइजेशन यानी निजीकरण से उन्हें कोई मतलब दिक्कत नहीं है, तो क्या खासकर शिक्षा और चिकित्सा जैसे समाज बुनियादी क्षेत्रों में 80% आबादी क्या वो अपनी पहुंच बना पाएंगे?
I'm Parvita from Center for Political Studies. My question is to Nirmala Sitharaman. Is the BJP and the NDA reversing the FDI and multi-brand retail policy decision if it comes to power? And if so, why will you do so? Thank you.
My question, I think this is the last question, and we'll have another round. So panelists can then answer the question, and we'll have another round after that.
My question.
So, yeah. If there's any question for Minister.
At the moment I came in, I have another commitment, so which I have already laid. And I requested Professor Kumar to inform all of you that if there are any questions for me, and I ask my panelists. No, I think that's what I'm saying. You identify yourself, put the questions, and if I have the permission of my colleague, then I will quickly answer.
Okay.
Though I am not taking away, of course, the value of the questions already put.
My question is primarily to Nirmala Sitharaman, to which Anand Samasa could also join. This is about Swadeshi. Now, BJP has been identifying the Swadeshi right from the days of Jan Sangha, but and now when the elections are being fought on the line of economic development, can I just ask you here that what happened to the process of indigenization of defense procurement? Now, the government in power, which is Congress, and do you think that when we are buying something which is buying our national defense assets, which are being procured from China, against which we are preparing for war, would it be a sustainable thing? Won't it be preparing for certain defeat? So in that sense, do you think that...
Let me correct you right now. India does not procure defense equipment.
Yeah, Lockheed Martin outsources from China. The recent Hercules one. No, I am giving a specific example.
No, 1 minute. Let him ask the question. Just let him ask the specific question.
My question is to Minister Sharma ji. I want to ask about like the recent data of the NSSO. The unemployment has been touching around 20%. It's 70% in the
see the higher educated, they are around 17%, the new entrants in the market force, 17% of them are unemployed, and in the illiterate and in the lower end semi-skilled or unskilled people, they are also, the unemployment figure is less because they could not go for they don't have the capital, the social capital and other capital to withstand. But with the demographic divide India is entering into, and so many young people, this is the take, what is your take on how do you plan to provide a meaningful job creating growth?
I want to raise
Just
a question
we'll
for...
do a second round. We'll do a second round.
Well, I have this my hand for
Okay.
And I think in a university, my question should be important for all the members of the panel. Because the question I want to raise is about education. The situation with education in India is not just crisis, it's been crisis-ridden now for the last 30 years. So let us realize that perhaps everyone who's sitting on the panel is responsible for the problem. Now, the point is that if you are going to privatize education, then you may as well forget entering the 21st century or the 22nd century. You keep saying that you have 50% of the youth is in this country. If that 50% is uneducated, is unable to get proper education, if you're dismantling the system of public funded education and in fact promoting private education, so much so that agencies collecting information for the government are today saying that by 2020, 50% of children will be paying for primary education. Not for higher education and professional education, but for primary education. Where do you hope to take this country? All of you.
And he can also answer some of the questions raised by the other panelists, because there are a lot of questions to him from the other panelists also. So we'll go around the circle and
let me tell you one thing. You have, and I'm very happy, the panelists, my colleagues, we make up from different parties or ideological streams. Each one of us is as committed and as concerned a citizen of the country as any one of you. Let me put this straight on the record. Number two, we all have been political activists, student leaders and youth leaders. So we understand issues. There's no disconnect in our minds or hearts. Your questions about education, despite the paucity of resources which this country did face after its independence, we had the vision of the first Prime Minister of India to invest in institutions. It was in the one day